Welcome to the second day of Selenium training. In the first day, we saw various things like how to install Visual Studio, how to use various data types and all. We saw a lot of things on the first day. Also, we saw why Selenium is used and which all languages is supported. And why do we use C# language? What is the importance of C#? So we started with the basics of C# and I just told you some basic stuff. So now let's move forward to some of the advanced topics like loops, arrays and functions. And as we proceed, we'll also discuss why we need to study these topics while studying Selenium and where all in Selenium will we be using this. Okay, so now let's create a new project in Visual Studio. Okay, so I create a new project. Module 2. And in the module 2 project, I'll just rename this program.cs class with concatenation operator. So now we'll see what are concatenation operators in C#. Okay, so now this is the main function. Over here, say suppose I have one string variable x and then I put in double quotes hello. Okay, and another string variable y is equal to world. So now what I want to do, I want to type hello world in one single line. So what we can do is that we can write console.writeLine x plus y. Okay, so over here this plus is the concatenation operator. We had seen this in the previous class as well, where we were concatenating the various strings and the numbers. Fine, so this plus is the concatenation operator over here. If suppose we have two integers, say I have int a is equal to 100 and int b is equal to 200, and then I write console.writeLine a plus b, and then I can simply write console.readKey. And now when you run your code, the result out here would be, so it says it prints the output as hello world in one single line, and then it just adds up the two numbers, that is 100 and 200, to give the output 300. So it just adds up the two integer numbers that we had given. Okay, but there's a catch over here. If suppose we write console.writeLine a plus b plus x plus y, and similarly we write x plus y plus a plus b. Okay, and now if we run our code, so now look at the last two lines of the output. These two outputs would be quite different, not up to your expectations. So the first line says, in the first line, what it is doing, it is adding up the two integer numbers, that is 100 and 200, and then it concatenated the value of x, that is hello, then concatenated it with the value of y, that is world. And in the next line, the execution starts from the left hand side. X and y are concatenated, then it is concatenated with the value of a, that is 100, then concatenated with the value of b, that is 200. Right, so there is a potential difference between these two lines. Had I been written like this, if suppose I had been written console.writeLine x plus y plus a plus b in the brackets, and now when I run my code, So here you look the output as hello world being concatenated, and then it concatenated with the sum of the two numbers, that is 300. Okay, so what you need to do, you just need to put the integer numbers in the bracket in order to get the sum of the integer numbers. Okay, so over here you have to be very careful while using the concatenation operator. You might get error while working with Selenium as well. Okay, so you might get confused over there as well, so you have to be very careful while working with the concatenation operator. It never adds up directly, especially in the case of string. Fine, so now let's just move forward to the next topic, that is loops. We'll now look forward to what are loops. Till now everything that we have studied is there in every programming language. Till now that whatever we have done is there in every programming language. Real C# will actually start from module 3, that is what is the concept of OOPs, in which we will study the static and the non-static concept, creating objects, difference between object and object references. Fine, so the real C# will actually start from module 3 itself. If you are familiar with these topics, you can directly switch over to module 3. No need to consider this class. Okay, but for people who are not from this background, who actually want to learn C# from the very beginning, so for them this class would be quite beneficial for them, right? So now let's just move forward to the next topic, that is loops. What are loops? Okay, so firstly we will consider the while loop. So I create a new class known as while loop. Okay, and over here inside this class I'll just make one main function. Okay, now one thing to note over here is that in Visual Studio you cannot have multiple main functions inside one single class. You cannot have multiple main functions. Okay, when you try to run your code, you will get an error stating that compile with the main to specify the type that contains the entry point. So you just cannot have multiple main functions inside one single class. Okay, so what we do is that we'll simply comment this main function of the concatenation operator class so that we can execute our code correctly. Fine, so now let's just look into the concept of loops. Okay, now in the main function, firstly I just initialize I variable equal to 0. So over here this is known as the initialization step. Okay, this is known as the initialization step, and after that we will create the while loop like this. While I is greater than I is less than 10, console.writeLine I, and then I is equal to I plus 1. Okay, and at the end we can write console.read key. Okay, so this is how the while loop works. Now what is this condition telling you? What does it tells you? It means that till the time the value of I is less than 10, keep on running the while loop and keep on printing the value of I till the time this condition is satisfied, and then increment the value of I by 1. Fine, so now when we run our code, over here you see that it prints the number from 0 to 9. Okay, so while loop is something which will keep on running every time till the time condition is satisfied. So over here you can simply say that this I less than 10 is known as the condition part. Okay, and I is equal to I plus 1 is the incrementation part. or you can say the decrementation part. Okay, so while loop will keep on executing itself till the time the condition is satisfied. You can even see the execution of the while loop by debugging the program as well. Now debugging means running the code line by line as per the way you want it to run, as per the way you want it to control your code. Okay, so debugging is very strong. It is very powerful concept. You need to learn it because while writing in big Selenium scripts you can get an error. So to resolve those errors you will need to debug your program, and you will need to see the execution of the program line by line. Fine. So how can we debug our code is that we will put a breakpoint. We can simply put a breakpoint on our code. So you just need to click over here in from on the left side, just click a single click, put a single click on there, and you will see this red dot coming. So this is the breakpoint. Okay, and in order to execute your code in the debugging mode, you just need to click on this start button. And when you click on this, you will see that your cursor will stop on the breakpoint. Your program will just stop on this breakpoint, and to execute, to just simply run with the breakpoint, what you need to do is that you need to press the F11 key. Okay, when you press the F11 key, the cursor will move line by line on each and every line. Okay, so over here I is initialized to 0, so the value of I initially is 0, and then we have a condition why I is less than 10. Since I is 0 and 0 is less than 10, so it goes inside the while loop and then prints the value of I, that is 0. Okay, and then in the next step I is incremented to I plus 1, that is 0 plus 1 is 1. So the value of I is updated to 1. Okay, so then again it will move to the while loop. Since the value of I is now 1 and 1 is less than 10, so it goes inside the while loop, prints the value of I, that is 1, and then it updates the value of I to 2. That it just increments the value of I by 1, and then I is incremented to 2. Fine. So again you press F11 key, so it will keep on executing your code line by line till the time condition is satisfied, that is I is less than 10. Okay, and you can simply hit the F5 key in order to run your code normally. So when you press the F11 key, you see that you can see your output in the console window, that is it prints the number from 0 to 9. Fine. So this is how you can just debug your code by just putting a breakpoint on your code, and hitting the F11 key will debug your code line by line, and if you want to run it directly, you can just hit the F5 key. Okay, so breakpoints are very powerful. I have just told you a small example over here. When you will be actually running the bigger scripts using Selenium, actually there you will get to know what exactly is the practical usage of the breakpoints. Fine. So over here even we can simply write I plus plus as well. So this is one and the same thing, that is increment the value of I by 1. I will be incremented by 1. Okay, and even it's one and the same thing. And even what we can do, if we want to print the numbers in the reverse order, okay, so even we can do with that as well. Even if suppose we write I is initialized to 10 and we want to print the numbers in the reverse order, that is 10, 9, 8, 7 up to 1. Okay, so what you need to do, we can do that as well. So you say while we initialize the value of I with 10, and then we give the condition as while I is greater than 0, print the value of I, and then we need to give the decrementation, that is I minus minus. Okay, so now when we run our code, we click on continue. So now you see that it prints the number in the reverse order: 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so this is how the while loop works. This is the basic syntax of the while loop. Fine. So now let's move forward to for loop. Now before we actually go to the for loop, let us see the disadvantage of the while loop first. So the disadvantage of the while loop is that if we in the while loop, if suppose we don't write this incrementation or the decrementation part, okay, if suppose we don't just give this condition, okay, and then if we try to run our code over here, we continue. Over here you see that your loop will get stuck in an infinite loop. It will keep on printing 10, 10, 10 infinite number of times, and it will not stop until you forcefully close it from here. Okay, so when you close it, your loop will end. So this says that if you are not giving the incrementation or the decrementation statement, then you will be stuck in an infinite loop in the case of while loop. Okay, until and unless you do not forcefully close the console window, it will keep on executing infinite number of times. So this is the disadvantage of the while loop. Fine. So now let's move forward to what is for loop. So I create a new class, for loops. Okay, and inside this as well I just create a main function. Okay, and I just write console dot read key, and I'll just comment this main function of the while loops. Okay, so now let us consider the for loop, how the for loop works. Okay, so the how to initialize the for loop is that we write for int I is equal to 0, then terminate it with the semicolon, then the next statement is I less than 10, terminate it with the semicolon, and then I plus plus. Okay, so over here this first is the initialization part, that is we have initialized the value of I to 0, so this is known as the initialization part. Then it is the condition part, and then it is the incrementation or the decrementation part. Okay, so out here in the for loop you are forced to give everything in one single line, so there is no chance of getting stuck in an infinite loop like in the case of while loop. Okay, and then simply you can just print the value of I as well. Okay, and then when you run your code over here, you will see that it prints the number from 0 to 9 until till the time condition is satisfied. It prints the number from 0 to 9. Okay, so the basic motto of both the loops are same, but the syntax is only differing. The syntax differs in both the loops. For loop is more famous than the while loop. Okay, so this is how you can print the numbers from 1 to 10 with the for loop. Now suppose we want to find the sum of first 100 numbers with the help of the for loop. Okay, so I just initialize the sum variable to initially 0, and then we may write the for loop as int n is equal to 0, n is less than equal to 100, and then n plus plus, and then we can write sum is equal to sum plus n. Okay, and after that we can simply print the value of sum. Okay, or you can say sum of first 100 numbers is, and then we can concatenate it with the value of sum. Okay, so now when we run our code, so here you see that it gives the output as sum of first 100 numbers is 50. So how did this logic work? How actually did this logic work? How did this happen? You can debug the program to understand this. Okay, so for that you will have to put the breakpoint. Say we put a breakpoint over here. Okay, and now when we click on this start button, so the cursor stops here at the breakpoint, right? And now to execute it, we press F11 key. We hit the F11 key. So initially the value of n is 0 and sum is also initialized to 0, right? So we hit F11 key. So it says, it goes that the condition is n less than equal to 100, and then it goes inside the loop. So it says sum is equal to sum plus n. So the sum is equated to 0 since the sum is 0 and n is also 0. So 0 plus 0 is equal to 0. So the value of sum is 0 right now. Okay, so now we press F11 key. So now the value of n is incremented by 1. So now the value of n has been changed to 1. Okay, and 1 is less than equal to 100. So it will go inside the for loop, and now the value of sum will be updated to 1 since 0 plus 1 is equal to 1. Okay, so now we press F11 key, and now the value of n will be updated to 2, and the sum would change to 1 plus 2 is 3. Okay, so it prints the value of sum as 3 now. So now we again press F11 key, value of n is changed to 3, and sum would now change to 3 plus 3 is 6. Okay, so you press F11 key, value of n becomes 4, and now the sum would become 6 plus 4 is 10. Okay, so this will keep on executing line by line till the time the condition is satisfied. Okay, so in order to directly run your code, you press F5 key, and it will give you your output. Sum of first 100 numbers is 50. Okay, so this was just a simple example of how you can execute your code with the help of breakpoints as well. And these were the simple examples of the for loop to print the sum of the first 100 numbers, and a for loop to print the numbers from 1 to 10. Okay, so this was just a small example of the for loops. Okay, now we'll see the practical example on the for loop. Okay, that is how can we use for loop with Selenium. That is where will we be using this loop in Selenium. Okay, now suppose we have an Excel file. I'll just create a new Excel file over here, test data. Okay, and over here suppose I have the columns as username, password, then we have email, and we have the zip code. Okay, okay, so you will have your data inside the Excel file for each and every row. Okay, similarly we will have some data for the second row. Okay, so you will have your data on each and every row while executing this stuff with the Selenium as well. Soon we will be reading this Excel file with the C# code to write your data driven scripts in Selenium. So to write the data driven scripts, we will be using a for loop to iterate through the row number as well as the column number. Okay, using the for loop we will be iterating through the Excel sheet. Okay, so this is the major usage of the for loop in Selenium while learning with C#. Some of them might be finding it simple, but just have patience, because some people over here there are some people who don't have the knowledge of C#. For them this would be quite beneficial. It would be when we would be moving to the advanced topics as well. So this is just a very basic kind of a stuff. You just need to practice them at your hand as well. Until and unless you don't practice, you are not going to reach anywhere. There is no need to just see these videos and buy the videos as well, until and unless you don't practice them at your end as well. Okay, so this is what is the practical usage of the for loop. So now let's just move forward to the next concept of arrays. What arrays are, what is the practical advantage of the arrays, how arrays are used, what are arrays, can arrays be used practically with Selenium. Okay, so we'll add a new class, arrays, and inside this class as well I'll add a main function. Okay, and I add a console.read key. Okay, and I just comment this main function of the for loops. Okay, so now what is an array? Now suppose I have a lot of data with me in the Excel sheet. Okay, suppose I have a lot of data with me. Okay, so to make in order to work with the Excel file, to work with this very data, suppose we initialize some variables corresponding to the Excel file, that is string username is equal to any value. Then we have another variable password. Then we have email is equal to something @gmail.com. Then we have another variable for the zip code is equal to any number. Okay, so sometimes you will have a lot of data with you. Okay, you will have a lot of data with you. This is just a little bit of data that you can simply see over here. This will be quite confusing for you right now, because suppose you've got 100 fields on your web page and you need to fill the values in those 100 text boxes using Selenium. So what exactly will you do over there? What will you do? So out there we will be using arrays. Out there we will be using the arrays. Now what is an array? Array is basically a memory location in which you can store multiple values. For example, array will simply look like this. I'll just show you. Okay, array will simply look like this. It will have sections like this, and each section can store something. And okay, each section can simply store something, say any value over here inside each section, and then each section has got an index associated with this. So the first index is 0, then 1, 2 and 3. Okay, so this is similar to the way like every house has a house number. So each section is to be considered as a house, each box can be considered as a house, and you recognize the house by its house number. That is, first house with the house number 0, second house with the house number 1, third house with the house number 2, and fourth house with the house number 3. Right? So for that we can simply make a string array like this: string str is equal to new string, and inside this you need to give the size of the array as well. Okay, so you need to specify the size of the array, that is the string array. This array has got 5 houses inside it. Okay, so first house would be at index 0, second house would be at index 4, right? So second house would be at index 1, third house would be at index 2, and fourth house would be at index 3. Because right, so because first house is starting with the index 0, so we just have that.